Remember the year that everyone was bipolar? And I do mean everyone. I can't remember the specific year, of course, and maybe not in your world, but in my world, it was definitely a thing. My friends would be sick of their parents, and they would say something like, "Oh my God, my mom is so bipolar. She said I could go last night, and then she changed her mind because of my grades." And I'd be like, "No, girl, that wasn't your mom. That was you. You just didn't do what you had to do at school." I'd hear couples get into an argument, and they'd scream at one another, and one of them would say something like, "Well, maybe if you weren't so freaking bipolar." Or I'd hear a girlfriend of mine blurt out something like, "No, but tell me why I really am bipolar, because I was listening to so-and-so's music last night, and girl, I got all of my feelings, and I started bawling." And I'd be like, "Well, since when does an argument over unwashed dishes or listening to breakup music constitute as having a mental illness?" I mean, it seemed pretty simple to me, but I stayed quiet because it didn't really affect me. It only got a little more complicated when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it did. I have struggled with depression since I was 10 years old. More than I know my own name, I have known the most immense highs and the most extreme lows. But when you're a black girl growing up in the church background, girl, you can just pray that away. I mean, of course, you can do certain things to combat this so-called depression, right? Which doesn't really exist because it's just a decision to be ungrateful for the good things in your life. And don't get me started on the fact that you're a strong black woman, because we don't deal with that. That's not for us. In recent years, being bipolar has sort of become seemingly more popular. And in so many circles, being bipolar is only a figure of speech. It's not even real. It's so far away. Until one day it isn't. And that day is when you're 22 years old, you're waking up in a mental ward after your third suicide attempt. And it's not a figure of speech when they're telling you that you can't go home at Christmas time because you're a danger to yourself, and first you need to learn how to manage your depression better and your moods and your stress before they let you go. It's not a figure of speech when you literally cannot bring yourself to get out of bed or shower or even eat. And it's definitely not a figure of speech when you're on the verge of losing your job, because the sounds in your own head are so much louder than any external noise that you could hear. And there's nothing figurative about your family being terrified of you, walking around on eggshells whenever you're in the room as if they're afraid to say something or do something that could set you off, which, let's be real, doesn't have to be much. Speaking of, I have my family right here. I got my mom up there somewhere who I absolutely owe an apology to. Because I love you guys, you are my family, and I am so appreciative that you've been so supportive of me when I've been mean. There's so much irony in the fact that I'm a figure of speech. I work in radio and I speak for a living, and on Instagram, life looks really good. I entertain for a paycheck, like I crack jokes and I smile and I shake hands with fans and listeners when I meet them, no matter how I'm feeling on the inside. But now at 27 years old, 17 years after I first felt the confusion of not knowing what I was feeling, and only 5 years since getting a confirmed diagnosis, I have finally given myself permission, literally, to accept myself and my brain as they are. I have given myself permission to understand my illness as it is, literally just as strong, still just as black, just as Christ-following and church-going, but far more conscious of my words and the words of others as it pertains to the stigmas of mental illness. More aware that yes, I have bipolar disorder and that it calls for regular exercise and maintenance and family support, that mental illness is not a figure of speech to be used flippantly to describe minor frustrations or inconveniences. It doesn't target one race of people or one gender. That sometimes I have days where I may take a sick day because I can't get out of my own head and I need the day to regroup. Because my struggle and my sickness, which I deal with regularly, are just as real as any cancer, illness, or a common cold that anybody else faces. With therapy, the support of my family and friends, and with medication, which by the way, y'all, I am officially 32 days of taking my meds on time and not skipping a day. I can quite literally be as successful and content and as happy as I want to be, and there is nothing figurative about that.